The disqualification of Christ's divinity according to your argument that God cannot be caused. And then we're also going to discuss on how you believe your refutation of composition is going to be sufficient in the deniability of the traditional profile of what God is.
Okay, listen. If you want to ask me a question, I can answer it. If you don't want to, I can ignore you. You're nothing. You're nobody. You're not important. Anyway, have you got a question?
So then the composition argument that firstly, you deny divine simplicity, that all of the attributes within God is identical to himself. Therefore, all of Allah's attributes are going to be less than the whole itself. If therefore, he is composite because he's composed of things that are less than the whole itself. The point is that because you said I have to load this in a question, I have to go for a line of premises and ask the conclusion as a question. And the agreed discussion for the sake of the camera is firstly your issue or contention with Christianity that Christ cannot be God because he has a cause. And then my argument to you is going to be that your God cannot be the God of natural theology because you reject divine simplicity, therefore implying that your God is composite and the first act is going to be composing himself.
Do you accept the fact that in Christianity there are different views on divine simplicity?
Yeah, and that's kuffar.
Okay, so what strand of Christianity do you follow?
Eastern Orthodoxy.
Okay, so is Eastern Orthodoxy unanimous in its proclamation of divine simplicity?
Yeah, either for example, St. Maximus wants to affirm absolute divine simplicity, or some of the Cappadocians want to further divine simplicity, but at least we're going to have to affirm divine simplicity.
Yeah. Divine simplicity, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's say, for example, let's look at Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas...
I don't agree with Thomas Aquinas.
No, but he believes in divine simplicity. And
of course.
Is it okay for you to hold to the distinctions that are held by someone like Thomas Aquinas and or Duns Scotus, or does that make no sense?
So I'm just going to say that when we speak of God's attributes, the common definition of the word, as to avoid his attributes being non-cognitive, like saying, oh, God has this and is blah, blah, blah. The common definition of the word is the same, but the way that God possesses it is different.
So which scholars of Christianity do you accept as authoritative?
I mean, it's just going to be the scholars that I can agree with are the corpus of the church fathers and the canonized saints. Sure. So premise one, you reject divine simplicity, the concept that God, all of his attributes are going to be identical to himself. Sure. Conclusion two, you say that his parts are going to be less than the whole itself. Conclusion one, therefore, your God is composite. Point three, your own tradition of Sunni Islam says that God is the first act. Premise four, therefore, if he is composing himself, therefore the first act is going to be composing himself. Conclusion two, therefore, if you want to say that Allah is the God of natural theology, this would not follow through because you said that this first principle's first act is going to be created, which within the previous premises have been outlined as, for example, him composing himself. The first act is not creating, it is composing, which therefore means we cannot reason Allah through natural theology.
So I'll be honest, I'll need to hear that argument again because I didn't understand it. 1 minute. Take 1 minute. You can speak.
How about this? For the simple child discussing with me here, we go premise by premise in an untimed situation because I'm not going to have less than 2 minutes to talk on an argument I hadn't even been able to finish. Conclusion three.
Why does that follow?
Because if he is composed of things that are less than the whole itself, therefore we can pick out things which are going to be really distinct from him, which are less than him, which means that they're going to be things that are comprising himself.
So, okay, let's start with the first thing he said, which is the only thing really intelligible that he said, which is that the proposition of divine simplicity indicates that when you say that something is an attribute of God, it's saying that that's identical to the essence of God. So the point is this, is that if that's the case, you have to admit today that God is not love. You know why? Because if God is love, is identical to the essence, God's love is also identical to what? To the law of identity, is also identical to his knowledge. So God's love is God's knowledge, and God's knowledge is God's power. You must admit to this. And if that's the case, you believe in a God without attributes. You are, as many Christians would say, pretty much an atheist, because you believe in a deistic God, a non-personal God, a God that can't love, a God that can't be merciful, a God that can't be powerful, a God that, because these things, these descriptors and attributes when you say that God's power is identical to his essence, if God's power is identical to his essence and his knowledge is identical to his power, it follows God's power is God's knowledge. It follows God's power is God's love. It follows God's power is God's compassion, and so on and so forth. Therefore, you have to admit today that you don't believe in a God that loves. Go ahead and do it.
Okay, so notice how he didn't really respond to the argument and that we're just moving arguments. So, the first point is that anti-reflex identity does not work within the Trinity. Just as much as, for example, when we say the Son is God, we do not therefore say that whenever we're talking of God, we're talking of the Son, just as much as we say Mohammed Hijab is human, but when we pick out humanity, we're not talking about Mohammed Hijab. That is anti-reflex identity, my friend, and it does not work in the case of the Trinity. My second point is again going to be that we can be apathetic about these things within a syllogism. We can say that because you do not believe in X, therefore you're going to have the position which entails Y. If you reject that God is not composed of parts, therefore he is composed of parts. Do you see the point here? If you reject a negative, therefore you're going to affirm the positive, that is that God is composed of parts. Now the reason why you believe in this is because the essence of God is going to be comprised of things which are less than the whole itself.
He has not conceded to the fact that if you say that God's power is identical to his essence and his knowledge is identical to his essence, it follows that his knowledge is identical to his power by the law of identity. That is a logical law. So he has to now acknowledge, before we move forward, he has to tell me, yes, when I say God is love, when Christians say God is love, according to divine simplicity, it's not true that he's actually love in an ontologically real sense. It's just some words we say.
Okay, so I want to demonstrate that supposedly this very foundational principle of identity is just going to pull him into extreme positions. So Hijab, during my time, I want to ask you a question. Hijab, you're a human, yes? Hijab, stop filming for your OnlyFans for a minute and answer my question. Hijab equals human. Human does not equal hijab. I wonder why. Because anti-reflex identity does not work in the case of the Trinity. Just because hijab is human does not whenever I say this individual here is a human, he is therefore hijab. I wonder why. Because identity does not work in this way. I can be identical to the divine essence, for example, whilst also, for example, possessing hypostatic properties. Hijab can be identical to humanity, whilst not everyone who is human be identical to hijab.
So I'm saying that according to divine simplicity, this is what they say. The divine simplicists say that the attribute of God is equivalent to the essence of God. So if it's equivalent to the essence of God, if God's power is God's essence, and God's knowledge is God's essence, it follows God's power is God's knowledge, which means when Christians say God is love, if they believe in divine simplicity, they're lying to you. That's what it means.
Because you haven't really argued for why the argument follows, right? You're just bringing a case of identity being anti-reflex identity, then already assuming it applies to the Trinity, by then saying an arbitrary criteria of this identity being in play. You notice how for someone that was picking out my poor debating skills, he already runs from an assumption, from an argument he's already ran away from. He ran away initially from an argument against composition, then ran to my position whilst having an argument that assumes a principle of identity to which I don't agree to.
If you believe by the law of identity that God's power is God's essence and God's knowledge is God's essence, it follows God's power is God's knowledge. This is in a GCSE way for you to understand. I know you're a GCSE student. I remember this one. Trust me, if you are my A-level student, and I know I've got 6 degrees, one of the most qualified men in the world actually.
What sells fake degrees?
I haven't said that.
That sells fake degrees.
Trinity, do you know why? Because if you say that the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God, in that sense, if they are all God in distinct personas, as they say, and as Gregory of Nyssa and Gregory of Nazianzus and his Cappadocian authorities say, I don't know how it could be the case. How could it be the case that you believe in 3 and 1 and 1 and 3, but you don't believe in parts of God? It's absolutely ridiculous to postulate that. You don't believe in, you believe in no composition, but you believe in a Trinity. Try and square the circle for me, my friend.
Okay, so again, and he's brought up the essence as it pertains to the substantiations, i.e. the persons. So Hijab, please answer this question in my time. Hijab,
No.
Are you equal to humanity? Are you a human? Do you want to answer me?
Yes.
Because I can, okay, he's running this argument. The Son is God. God, therefore, is the Son. The Son is not the Father, because then you either lead into composition or you lead to polytheism. Although we reject polytheism, we say there's one God, therefore it leads into composition. But I want to ask him this, and this makes very perfect sense. Hijab is a human. JC is a human. Is JC Mohammed Hijab? No, because there's a thing called anti-reflux identity, which I've been begging for him, like all the children that he wants to say can marry adults, for him to say that why does this not work in the case of yourself, but works in the case of the Trinity? Please.
Why is there no polytheism?
Is it time? Is it time? He's got a bit of time.
Okay. Again, don't be a coward for Allah and resolve the issue of composition. I want you to answer why you affirm that the first act is Allah, was also the first action of Allah is to compose
Kids
himself.
nowadays have very little respect. No problem. Let me put this aside. Shut up. It's embarrassing. Look, here's the thing. Yeah, what he's describing, as I mentioned before, I don't think he's been paying attention. He's C grade now, but he can become a B grade if he listens a little bit closer, right?
Inshallah.
Here's what I'll say to you.
Islam, brothers and sisters.
Listen to what I'm saying to you. When you're dealing with a particular and a universal, it's different to dealing with two things with supposedly the same ontological value. So if here, for example, if you say that God's attribute is God, we're talking about God's attribute, we're assuming God's attribute has actual ontological status. So my point to you again, do you concede, considering this response, do you concede that according to your idea of divine simplicity, God is not loving in a real ontological sense? Yes or no?
So again, firstly, he's assuming that universals he's assuming that universals don't really exist.
Okay.
The reason why universals have to really exist is because we have to avoid the fact that language therefore becomes meaningless. So for example, when we say that Allah has attributes, we're picking out this normative definition of what it means when we say that Allah is loving, for example. If we want to say that in fact this is not a universal, it can be anything mind dependent upon the person. The common definition is what we're going to pick out in the universal of when we're referring to what is love. So why are you assuming that universals do not really exist within your argument? That's my first point. My second point, again, is you're just saying that it does not work in the case of a universal, or it does work in the case of a universal, even though in a particular it doesn't, and you're then just assuming that these universal natures do not really exist.
Okay. So if universals do exist in a platonically real sense that he's talking about, like what Plato believed, that there was a whole place there where the universe exists in a perfect sense, if they do exist in that sense, then his argument falls. Because actually, his argument only makes sense, his response only makes sense if the universal is not real. If you're saying that, for example, Muhammad is a human and you're a human, and so therefore me, I'm not you, if that's what basically he's saying. Humanity here is a universal which is not real in that sense. If it is real, then it does become a contradiction. Because if there is such a thing as a personified, manifested humanity or perfect human person, which Plato believed there was some kind of man there standing maybe in the heavens somewhere, Neoplatonic realism, if you believe in that, it actually does fall apart, which means if I'm that guy and you're that guy, how can we both be that guy at the same time? It's a contradiction. The same thing applies with the Trinity, and the same thing applies with your attributes of God on divine simplicity. So you fail. You fail. D- actually. Okay. But because you've been a little bit cognizant, I might give you a C+ and pass you, but I'm going to give you one more chance. Do you admit that God is not love, yes or no?
So I've got a question. So let's go back to the analogy of Muhammad is a human. What exactly are we picking out, or what exactly is being invoked when we say Hijab is a human and JC is a human? Of course, there's going to be this common definition that is invoked when we say that these two subjects are the same thing. Just to say that they don't really exist, I don't hold to this Neoplatonic understanding of that there is a perfect can of Coke that really exists somewhere else. I'm just not saying that they have to be conceptual or mind dependent on the person. That's metalinguistic nominalism, which I don't hold to, although you could hold to, therefore meaning that language has no definite meaning. But I want to ask Hijab this. He says they don't exist at all, if they don't have any ontological status. Well, that's what you just said on camera, and they'll pick that out. And again, he wants to answer me when he thinks it's going to better his argument, but when I actually want to ask an honest to God question within my time, he doesn't want to, because it will not help him. Now, what is being picked out when we say that Hijab is a human and JC is a human?
Okay, that's part time now, yeah? So, has he got a couple of seconds left?
Whatever, I don't care.
So here's the point. Here's the thing. I haven't declared my position whether I'm a conceptualist or a nominalist or whatever I am. I'm just basically saying to you that if you believe that, as you've mentioned, that universals do exist, the question would be then, in what context do they exist? In what context do they exist? Is it in a Neoplatonic, real kind of context? If not that context, in what context? In what context does humanity exist with actual ontological significance? So, for example, Plato believed that there was a perfect man out there, that we, like human beings, would, connect to it. So, for example, what differentiates a sword from a knife? According to Plato, there's like an archetype of what a sword is somewhere, an archetype of what a knife is somewhere, and then, wherever corresponds with that is in line. Now, if you don't believe in universals like that, if you believe in universals are real, the question in number one is, in what context are they real? And number two, how is it not now a contradiction? If I say, for example, I'm a human, which corresponds to something which is real, and he's a human, that actually does cause a contradiction. So once again, it's been refuted, but he doesn't understand it. If I can say one more time you want, I can try and scaffold it for you. I can try and put it in a syllogism, but I don't think you'll understand. This is your last chance. Is God love? Yes or no on your view? Okay. Is God love?
Okay, so I'm only gonna answer the question if it's not bounded on a framework that I don't have to agree to. So you notice how instead of actually answering my question on his nominalism, he just wants to ask the person which I'm not using these concepts, he is. If he's superimposing these concepts onto me in case of reforming a refutation, that therefore necessitates that he's going to have to provide a position on which this argument actually works. I can't suppose divine simplicity when critiquing Allah because I know divine simplicity does not work in the case of Allah. So then I have to ask you a clarifying question in the case of nominalism or universals in order to further our principle of identity in the application of a critique of the Trinity. So then what do you take then to be nominalism, or what is your position on nominalism? Because I was saying metalinguistic nominalism, or any form of nominalism rather, is this going to lead to concepts like humanity being meaningless? Because again, I'm asking you this when I said to you that anti-reflux identity does not work in the case of this particular, the Trinity, and this universal humanity, and you're contesting with the universals. So what is being picked out when we say the universal of humanity? If you want to say it's man-dependent, it has no meaning whatsoever. It's non-cognitive. Humanity could mean pedophilia in the case of Mohammed Hijab, which it probably does.
All right, so just because you said that, you've lost privilege to talk to me.
Okay.
Now you can go and obviously, don't disrespect, because I know you can do it to your dad, you can disrespect your mum at home, you can disrespect your dad, you can disrespect your Uncle Barry. Don't come and talk about pedophilia and something like that. Don't disrespect.
You were just talking to him.
No, hold on. He's like,
you have hurt feelings about
I haven't come to you with anything like that. I haven't disrespected you like that.
Wait, the first thing you said is you're not worth my time. The first thing you said on camera is I'm not worth your time.
Sure.
I am not worth your time.
That's not calling you a pedophile, is it?
That's saying I'm worthless.
So now that you are worthless in my eyes,
you're
going to see my back, know that I've asked him 5-6 times about the love thing. He couldn't answer it once. Go back to your daddy, maybe he can teach you a couple of manners. Go back to your mum, maybe she'll give you a little spank. And maybe he'll get
because my dad's age and my mum's age are equal, it's not like that.
It doesn't matter, but anyway, we'll see it. You can't answer the question. Christians can't answer the question. The only argument they've got is pedophilia.
No, I gave an argument. But
cool. You can't answer the question.
I gave her an argument.
Done now. Go back to your school. Go back to your school.
Go back to your masjid because you can't defend Allah. You can't defend him. You cannot.